Joining me for part 2 of my story. Appreciate you being here today. We're gonna get started in just a minute. If you're here, say hi in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. We're gonna make sure everything is running smoothly. Right, looks like we're up, we're live. Things are flowing. So I'm going to briefly recap what we talked about last time. It wasn't super long, so I'm going to just go over it again so you remember where we left off, so we can pick right back up and then start with the next part of the story. So as I mentioned before, this is a story that I wrote about I'm forgetting the exact timeline. 3 to 4 years ago. So it's an ongoing story, but this was kind of my reflections from a time where I went through some trials and tribulations and did a lot of reflecting on my life. Hey, South to West, thanks for joining. So I originally sent this out as a series of emails to my email list, and so I'm reading kind of some of the chapters of the story. Technically, we did parts 1 and 2 last week, but we're going to break it up a little bit differently on the lives because we have a little more time versus in an email. It's like a quick blurb, but we'll give it a few minutes for people to join us here. Hope you guys are having a great Monday. Let me know what you're up to this week. Are you doing anything fun? Is it a busy week? You got a lot going on? Is it a stressful week? All right, so we're gonna start off. That's another work week for you. All right. Yeah, it's just another work week. For me, it's always like, I'm my own boss, so some weeks that goes well and some weeks it doesn't. I'm trying to get organized this week, and oftentimes it's like, when you're an entrepreneur, I don't know for any of those who are entrepreneurs or you're your own boss out there, it can be really overwhelming sometimes thinking about all the different things you have to do. I do use a scheduling tool that's helped me a lot. It's called Asana. Let me know if any of you use a scheduling tool. It's actually been super helpful because it allows you to create tasks and due dates and assign it and check it off and add notes in there, which for me, for the way my brain works, I love it. I love being able to check off and see exactly what I did. But sometimes I get overwhelmed. So oftentimes it's like, okay, one thing a day. Okay, let me pick this thing to focus on today, and tomorrow I'll take another step further. But sometimes it's figuring out what's worth spending the time on. I don't have a specific, exact, detailed job description. I make it up as I go along. So, of course, these lives are one fun thing that I have myself do. Speaking of which, I think I'm only going to go live on this channel today, but I'm going to try going live on the Kettlebell Solo channel on Wednesday. We're going to be doing a Kettlebell Solo workout there. So I'm going to do Wednesday at 11 a.m. on the Kettlebell Solo YouTube channel. So if you just type Kettlebell Solo or you go youtube.com/@Kettlebell Solo, you'll be able to find that there. I haven't posted the live yet, but I will be doing that after this. So join me over there if you want to do a follow-along kettlebell workout on Wednesday. And Southwest, you're going to need a kettlebell for it, so I hope you've got one. You could probably use a dumbbell for some of it, but you're going to need a kettlebell to do all of it. So make sure you get that kettlebell. Let me know if you need a recommendation. Okay, so again, I feel like I should be more tech-savvy to know how to add in an image into this live, but I feel like that takes higher technology than I'm currently it takes putting it on my desktop, and I'm doing it from my phone. So I'm going to just show you on my computer the image, because what this email series was called is Not Your Typical Transformation. So that's what I called it, and I had this photo, and hopefully you can see this. Maybe I should zoom in on this photo a little bit. Showing you a screen on a screen. Okay, so these are photos of me. And not your typical transformation, because this is my starting point, okay? And this is me progressing over time. So you may notice that in some ways I look the most jacked and ripped here and here, right? And there's a body composition change and I got a little bit like heavier, still strong. And then I kind of like leaned out a bit, but don't look quite as muscular. So this was, so this tells me I did this email series in 2021. So this was from 2013 when I, had just become a trainer over the last couple of years, and then to just a few years ago. Now I feel like there's actually a couple other photos that have happened since then, but it's called Not Your Typical Transformation. And I'm going to tell you why. So here's what I wrote. My transformation is anything but typical. I was healthy and fit before I ever became a trainer or a kettlebell sport athlete. This is a transformation that required overcoming societal and familial expectations and my own limiting beliefs. This story is about the trials and tribulations of becoming a 7-time master sport and world champion, the damage I sustained physically and psychologically because of my desire to be the best, and the path that I've traveled to heal myself and find balance. I'll tell you about the demons that drove my compulsion to exercise, what it was like to be a kettlebell celebrity, why I quit Instagram for a few years, since come back to it, why I don't compete anymore, what I do now, and how I've changed my approach to coaching. So that's kind of our intro into this series. I'm going to quickly recap the 2 chapters we did last week in case you missed it. So the first one is called Sick on the Platform. There's another photo here, which again, I wish I knew how to insert into it, but that's me, and that's one of the best kettlebell sport athletes in the world, Senya Dedukina, at the World Championships in Dublin in 2015, I believe. I was standing on the platform holding a 53-pound kettlebell over my head, and I felt worse than I had ever felt in my life. I felt feverish and depleted with very little energy left in the tank. I was ill and completely unfit to be lifting a kettlebell, but I had traveled all the way to Ireland for the World Championships, so there was no going back. I was on the platform competing against the best female kettlebell athlete in the world. She doubled my score that day. It's true. While it was far from my best performance, I hung on as long as I could to get within 10 reps of my personal best. I left after my set to go crash at the hotel. I didn't leave the room for the rest of the day. I was down for the count. I loved traveling to compete all over the world for kettlebell sport, and I wouldn't change my experience for anything. That being said, I trained myself to ignore the signals of my body in order to achieve the goals of my mind, when clearly my body was giving me distress signals over and over again in different ways. And there's another photo here. Look at me, I look like a zombie. That was me competing when I felt like shit. I let my mind and intellect be the drivers rather than my body and my intuition, and this bled into my career and my personal life. Getting ill at this competition was my body's check engine light telling me how far off course I was. I was just too arrogant to listen. I wanted what I wanted, and I thought the choices I made for myself only affected me. I didn't know how far from the truth that was. Every choice I made had a ripple effect outward into the world, whether through my attitude, my energy, or the sequence of events that happened as a result. So that was part 1, then we went into the next part, which is the champion mindset. Okay, so this we also read last week, and after this we'll go into the new part of the story. So for this one, I think I showed you this last week, but here's my little image I made. Little devil and angel sitting on my shoulders. I was making history by competing in the most anticipated event of the World Championship. It was the first time ever that women were competing with 2 53-pound kettlebells in the long cycle event. That's 106 pounds. It's heavy. At one point in time, this was believed to be impossible for women to compete in this event with that weight. The pressure was on, to say the least. There was a war being waged internally. The fatigue of my body versus the tenacity of my mind. I was standing on the platform in front of hundreds of people. The little devil sitting on my right shoulder whispered in my ear, "You're getting tired. You should set the bells down now and give up." The little angel on my left shoulder chimed in, "You can do it. You've trained too long and too hard for this to give up now. The little devil protested, "Why are you doing this? Your body is screaming for you to stop. You might even injure yourself." A kettlebell sport competition is 10 minutes of sheer, unadulterated hell. During that set of long cycle, I experienced my heart pounding in my throat, my lungs on fire and ready to burst, full body exhaustion, and an overwhelming urge to vomit or poop. In the end, the angel won, reminding me of my goals and aspirations and how good it would feel to accomplish what I set out to do. The pain and discomfort I felt paled in comparison to my desire to win. You could say I have a true champion mindset, hence why that pesky little devil never won out. There are many benefits to having a champion mindset, such as mental tenacity and confidence in physical abilities. I believe the tenacity that I built through kettlebell sport helped me face the many challenges I struggled with over the past several years. That being said, my champion mindset came from deep-rooted feelings of unworthiness and my desire for validation. Pushing my body to its breaking point and beyond shows how desperately I wanted those accolades and the social rewards that followed. The mind is powerful. It can overcome the body. But just because it can, doesn't mean it should. When I think back to that little devil on my shoulder who asked me, "Why are you doing this?" Perhaps he wasn't a devil at all, but rather a voice of reason. I kept following the little angel to the point that even after I had reached world champion status, I pushed even harder and further, only to make things worse for my body. We'll have to flash forward for you to understand what I mean. Now here's where we get into the new part of my story that I haven't told. And we're going to start it off with that image that I shared as the thumbnail. And you'll see why I'm sharing this. But again, this is me when I became a trainer, was competing heavily in kettlebell sport. And this is me some years later. You can tell, like, you can look how extremely lean I am. There's like a ripped. I'm still strong and lean, don't get me wrong. But there's a difference here between these two, and I'm going to tell you the difference. This story is going to tell you the difference here, okay? So things started going haywire with my body when I began competing with double 20 kg and 24 kg kettlebells, okay? So 20 kg kettlebells are about 44 pounds each, 24s are 53 pounds each. So I started competing in double long cycle with those weights, which was much heavier than women had ever done, but I was able to do it. I was super strong, super conditioned, and I wanted to push that barrier, right? I wanted to do what other women hadn't done before. Haywire, you might ask. Fatigue, inability to recover, and constant stiffness and soreness, to name a few things. In spite of a healthy diet and increasing exercise, I was gaining weight. So that might sound weird, right? Normally you think if you eat healthy and you exercise a lot, you're gonna lose weight, right? That wasn't the case for me. It was as if my body was creating a protective layer to handle the unreasonable amounts of work I was forcing it to do. In hindsight, it makes sense that my body was rebelling, as my hormones were out of whack and it had been 6 years since my last period. While I wasn't ready to fully acknowledge the severity of the situation, I knew I needed to at least make a concerted effort to get my period back. My research indicated that stopping exercise and eating more would bring me back into balance. Not wanting to hear this, I bumped up my calories while maintaining my training, but without success. Deep down, I knew what I had to do to rebalance my hormones and get my period back. Looking at it now, it's staggering to think it only took 3 weeks for my period to come back and that it took 6 years to get to a place that I allowed that to happen. So for 6 years, I didn't have a period, but I just did not want to give up exercising the way I was exercising. So I just kept going, and it kind of shocked me that I hadn't done more damage to my body, as far as I knew, because my period came back relatively quickly. Clearly, I still hadn't learned my lesson, though. You'd think I'd learned my lesson after that. Nope. I went right back to training for my Master of Sport international class as soon as I regained my period. So I got my period and was like, I'm gonna go right back to it. I'm gonna go right back to training. Mick said this is for the ladies, I think. It's not just for the ladies. This is one piece of the story, but I think this is important whether you're a man or a woman to know this, because many men coach women or train with other women or have daughters or have sisters. So I think it's relevant for everybody. But of course, if it's uncomfortable, I understand. You don't have to listen. I'm not going to go into any specific details about my period. Don't worry. So I went right back to training for my Master of Sport international class as soon as I regained my period. My heavier body was a challenge to accept and clumsy to move. Yes, I was muscular, but I was holding on to excess water and fat, and I felt and looked puffy. I was uncomfortable with the weight gain, and I was worried what other people would think. Maybe you remember me, if you follow me for a long time, maybe you remember me posting body positive messages on social media around this. So this was like, oh gosh, at this point it's like 8 years ago maybe. So if you followed me for that long, you may remember I used to post these body positive messages, which, you know, in many ways I still believe those things, but here we go. Maybe you remember me posting body positive messages on social media about accepting and loving yourself no matter what your body looks like. In part, this was to help me do that very thing. The other part was that people loved the posts, which made me feel better about myself and the fact that I was uncomfortable in my body. While I do believe in accepting your body no matter what, those posts were a cover-up for the insecurities that I felt. It was easier to feign acceptance of my larger body than it was to face the causes of my insecurities. In spite of feeling self-conscious about my body, I hit a new personal best of 51 reps in double 24 kg long cycle in November of 2017, which also made me feel better about myself, temporarily. In the process of training for it, however, I realized I no longer felt that same burning desire to achieve this Master of Sport International class rank. This had been my goal throughout my kettlebell sport career, as I wanted to achieve that rank. I realized I didn't care about it the same way. Simply put, I was burned out. I can continue training for the next couple months anyway, compounding the issues. By January, my body was saying no more. Find out what finally made me stop competing altogether next. I'm going to read the comments before I go into the next part. Hi, Brajovic, MVP. Thanks for joining. Hi, Kevs. Thanks for joining from Toronto and your kind words. I don't really speak Spanish. I know a few words. Thank you, Elena. I appreciate that. Elena said you're doing a huge emotional work by revealing this personal story. Heroic. Thank you. It's not done yet. There's more I got to add, really, because this is from like 4 years ago. So there's more I got to add, but I haven't written that part yet. Any other comments or thoughts before we move on to the next part here? All right, so the next part of my story is called My Body's Breakdown. Okay, I got a fun little image that I made. Fun little image that will make sense to you in a moment. See all those red flags on there? It's a work of art. All right, my body's breakdown. I had been getting really fatigued every few months or so, where I wouldn't be able to train for days or weeks because I was just utterly exhausted. Not just my body, but like my nervous system just felt fried. I would feel terribly depressed and down when it happened, but I brushed it off as a fluke and kept going. Okay, I'd feel like shit for a bit, and then I'd feel better again, and then I'd just keep going with my life. This was the first of many red flags, one which I, like most of them, ignored. After my double 24 kg long cycle set, November 2017, the one where I hit my new personal best, my motivation to achieve my goals in the sport had all but disappeared. By January, I was so tired that I couldn't find the motivation to do anything, physical or otherwise. My body felt like lead. I dragged myself to work in the morning, only to head back home at lunchtime and crash on the couch for a few hours before dragging myself back to work again in the evening. I tried to continue doing my handstand training, which I was also doing at that time, but I just couldn't recover. That's when things started getting really crazy. That's where this image is going to make sense that I just showed you. I got sick for a week, and no sooner had I recovered than I got sick again. This had never happened to me before in my life. Usually you get sick, your immune response comes up, you get better. I got sick, I thought I was better, and I got sick again. And I was like, what is going on? I had rarely been sick with anything more than a mild cold once a year, so to recover from being sick only to relapse was a big red flag. The red flags continued. I began to break out in hives inexplicably on my stomach and thighs. I'm not allergic to anything, but I started having reactions to things that had never bothered me before, like eating ginger or other spicy food. Again, those of you who followed me for a long time, I used to do this thing on my Instagram story where I would eat a piece of raw ginger and chew on it. People thought it was funny or liked it or were like, oh, I can't do that. Or some people were like, I love doing that. But I just, anything I cooked with ginger in it or eating ginger, it would just, I would get really hot and I would start breaking out in hives. Besides the hives, my digestion was not doing well either. And I'll spare you the details on that. Don't worry, Mick, I will spare you all the details on that. I had been suffering from athlete's foot for a few months, and that led to an infection in one of my feet. Later, I learned that a fungal infection is actually one of the first signs of a compromised immune system. It's one of the first things that happens if your immune system is really down in the tanks is you get a fungal infection, some kind of fungal infection. I felt so out of control with what was happening in my body that I knew something was seriously wrong. My immune system was clearly depleted and not functioning. My body was swollen and inflamed. You can see this if you look back at pictures of me during that time period, it may not be as noticeable to other people, but when I see it, like my face was like super round and puffy, and like my body also, I looked strong, but I looked like very puffy. I was, holding on to water, had some excess body fat. For how much I worked out, you would be like, that's interesting. Like she doesn't look real lean. But again, it was not super noticeable to other people, but to me, it was. My body was swollen and inflamed, and I felt like complete shit, mentally and physically. Nothing that normally excited me about my life sounded even remotely interesting. Things had to change. I made the decision to stop competing in kettlebell sport. I knew it was enabling me to keep overtraining, and for what? Yes, my identity was tied to my status as a top-level kettlebell sport athlete. I got a lot of attention and validation from people for that. Every time I would post a result, I'd get this flood of comments and likes and support and people messaging me and being amazed by what I did. So for somebody who is insecure and kind of looking for this validation to feel good about myself, that felt really good. I had tied my identity to that. I was a top kettlebell sport athlete and a coach, and that was how I, was defining myself in my life and online. So yes, my identity was tied to my status as a top-level kettlebell sport athlete, and that was tough to let go of. But I didn't feel the same drive that I once had, and it hadn't felt great on my body in a long time. And so I embarked on a path to healing. Or did I? Find out next time. Guys, have any thoughts? Should I continue on for one more? Or should we wait for next week? Let me know in the chat. Let me know if you guys have any comments. Are you shocked by anything that I shared so far? You got any questions? Comments? Hi, Angelo. Thanks for joining from Germany. South to West wants to continue on for one more. Anyone else? Got any other thoughts, comments? Okay, I'll read the title and show you the photo and then you can tell me, okay? So it's called Exchanging One Compulsion for Another. And this is my beautiful artwork that I made, okay? Exchanging one compulsion for another. Let me know. You guys want me to read one more? Want me to read this one? Okay, mix it one more. Laura said this is relatable. Elena says one more. All right, let's do it. I'm glad it's relatable for you, Laura. Okay. Exchanging one compulsion for another. After my body's breakdown, I knew it was time to stop competing. Each new goal or competition created an excuse for me to keep training and delay giving my body what it truly needed: rest. So I stopped training for a while. Sort of. I would still do handstands and mobility work at home. I started feeling better after a couple weeks, and I began doing gymnastics strength training at a new gym. Again, for those of you who follow me for a while, you may remember this. Now you can understand some of the backstory as to what was going on during that time. Not everything is as it seems on social media. It wasn't long before I was full on training for all the gymnastics strength skills, sometimes 3 hours at a time, and practicing handstands daily to boot. So I think in my mind, the way I justified it to myself then was, well, this is body weight. I'm not like lifting a bunch of weights. I can rest as much as I need between sets. I'm not getting my heart rate up super high. That was kind of how I justified it to myself. But again, if you saw me training at that time, some of those moves are pretty challenging, pretty intensive on the body. Excuse me. I justified the new training routine by telling myself it was slower and less intensive than kettlebell sport, but the truth is it was still way too much exercise to be healthy, especially for me at that time and what my body had been through. I still went through periods of time where I would feel exhausted and depressed for days, but I would bounce back and get right back to training. You might be wondering, why did I do this to myself? Like, what is going on? Some of you might relate, and some of you would be like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just stop? Why didn't you just do less? You see, training is what made me feel good about myself. When I was at the gym, I was able to be very present and in the moment with people and with what I was doing. I felt happy, I felt capable, I felt confident. Being an athlete and doing the impressive physical feats that I did had been tied to my identity for so long that I didn't know who I was without it. That had just been what I had built my life on, and what I did every day was based on that. I felt my worth was tied to my body looking the way that it once had. Like when I showed you that typical, this is not a typical transformation. That first picture when I was pretty lean, you know, that's how I kind of, I'll show you. For those of you who missed it in the beginning, I had this like picture that I created as sort of an intro. And I think this was, for a lot of the time, like this was what I was striving to look like, okay? This was when I was like 20, 21 years old and I was just shredded. I was working out twice a day and it worked great. You know, it works great initially, right? And I got super, super lean and ripped. And that was kind of what I was wanting to look like when I was over here, right? And again, I'm not saying I'm huge or anything, but I was a lot, like I said, I was puffy. I was holding on to body fat and water weight, and I just felt really uncomfortable with how my body looked and felt. So again, I was still lean, but I just, you know, I didn't look or feel like I had looked then, and I think I was kind of wanting to go back to that. Let's see. Yeah, so you see, I felt my worth was tied to my body looking the way that it once had, and I struggled to accept and love myself. All the while, I was avoiding the deeper issues and posting selfies with text about deeper issues for the wrong reason. I believed the validation and attention I got from social media would make me feel worthy of love. Because even though we can say all kinds of reasons why we use social media, a lot of times when we're posting cute selfies of ourselves and our outfits, like what are we looking for? what is one of the basic human drives is looking for like love and attention from people. You know, that validation makes all of us like feel good to a certain degree. And it's not like wrong that that gives you a sense of validation. It's part of human nature. It becomes a problem if it's your only sense of validation and you don't validate yourself, or you don't find your validation in other things. Given the choice of overtraining and feeling good versus actually letting my body heal and feeling like an emotional disaster, well, I think you know which one I chose. To better understand the roots of my exercise and body image issues, we'll have to go back in time, all the way back to my college days. And that's the cliffhanger. So this sentence here, this is the crux of why I kept going for so long, okay? Given the choice of overtraining and feeling good, because even though the overtraining was having effects on me physically and that I would sometimes be feeling depressed for days, in general, it made me feel good, right? Because I got an endorphin rush from it, and because I felt like proud of myself if I was working out or doing cool things, and my identity was tied to it. So it was like overtrain with the downsides of that, but overall feel good, or like actually let my body heal, stop overtraining, maybe don't exercise much for a while, which is what my body needed, and feel like an emotional disaster. Who would choose that, right? It's a tough one to go for that, because even though that would have been a better path for me to take earlier, I also understand why I didn't want to go that way, because it's difficult. It's difficult and it's painful. And I'll share more about like why it was difficult and painful as we go along. But that's why I, for so long, pushed myself so hard. And since that was kind of like, it wasn't like that was a conscious thing I was thinking about, okay, overtrain and feel good versus, stop training and heal and feel like shit. It wasn't like a conscious choice. But I understand why I just kept going that way, because maybe at some level I knew that other path was more difficult or more painful, or I was going to feel like an emotional wreck. Elena said, what you're doing with this memoir is hugely important, Brittany. You're revealing the psychological realities of extraordinary athletic achievement. Thanks, Elena. I know that I'm revealing that reality for myself, and I don't know that all athletes feel this way. But I do think there are many who have gone through a similar experience. And I trust there's plenty of athletes out there that did their, extraordinary feats of athleticism in a much healthier and more balanced way. And I'm sure there's many like me who hadn't, dealt with their emotional traumas and were using that as a way to avoid. So Neil said, do you exercise? Yes, I do, and have over-exercised a lot. I have exercised so much, so much in my life. Jez said, hi, Britt, I've been here listening. Were you also worried about losing everything you'd worked hard for with changing to body workouts from competing? Yeah, I think there was definitely some fear of, will I become irrelevant if I stop doing kettlebell sport? If I stop achieving this one thing after the next, and then that kind of transition into the gymnastic strength and the handstands, right? I loved doing it. It wasn't all for show. Like, I liked showing it, and I also loved doing it if I didn't show it, but it was a combination. And I do feel that I was afraid that if I stopped doing all these fancy things and these advanced moves, or my next kettlebell sport competition, that I wouldn't be as like relevant and I wouldn't get that attention. So I do think there was definitely a fear of switching changing tacks, but I just got to a place where I couldn't not change anymore. It was too much. Like, I hit a rock bottom, right? I hit this place with my body where it's like, okay, this just isn't going to work. And you'll find more about that. Ali said, as a girl, why do you like biceps training? How big is your biceps? My biceps are pretty big. I like bicep training because I like muscles. Probably the same reason guys train their biceps, I guess. I like being strong. Mick said, and because you had to stop everything that you thought made you you. Yeah. So stopping the things that made me feel like myself. Exactly. South to West said, back when you were overtraining, did you do anything to treat yourself, like eat sweets, sleep in, etc., or were you totally Spartan? No, I was not totally Spartan. I didn't eat a super strict diet. I didn't eat enough, I think, for how much I was exercising. I think that's part of the problem. If you exercise a lot, especially as a woman, your body is very sensitive to like a lot of exercise and not a lot of calories. Like if you kind of keep your calories low and you exercise a ton, usually women get hormonal problems, especially if they're in their fertile years. So I just didn't eat enough, but I would eat treats, I would eat desserts, I didn't I don't know if I really included that in this story, but I've definitely struggled with disordered eating. I wouldn't say like binge eating, but like overeating, like undereating, overeating, fasting, trying to eat a small amount, some kind of like, I've struggled with a bit of like bulimia, like throwing up because I had overeaten and stuff like that. So I grew up in a family where there was eating disorders. So it's something that I think is very hard to escape completely if you have grown up in that kind of environment. Like at some level it manifests itself. But yeah, I was not totally Spartan. I did sleep in. I used to, when I was in my early 20s, I woke up super early in the AM to go to gyms. When I moved to San Diego, I didn't want to do super early morning. So like maybe I would get somewhere at like 7:30 or like, but I wasn't getting up at like 4 or 5 a.m. or anything like that. I was getting up at a fairly reasonable hour. Hey, Jedi James, thanks for joining. You're welcome. I appreciate you listening. Neil, I don't really like when people come on the chat and tell me to do things and go, do this, flex. Like I'm not going to do that. So, that's nice. If you want to go to a channel where someone does that, this is not the channel for it. So please stop asking. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts? I kind of want to read more, but I kind of also want to save it for next week so that you guys can kind of absorb what we talked about this week and not have like too many things we can't remember it all. So we're going to save it, but the next one is called Where It All Started. It's kind of an interesting one. So we'll do that one and a few other ones. It's going to be a good series. We'll return to this next week on Monday. And I did mention that this is the only day I'm going to go live on this channel this week. Really struggled, like some reason, like haven't been getting a lot of people to see it. I don't know why, but I appreciate those of you who are here today. It seems like my story is helping. And on Wednesday, I'm going to try going live on the Kettlebell Solo channel, and we're going to do a follow-along workout. So if you want to do a live kettlebell workout with me this week, join me on Wednesday. I'm going to do 11 a.m. Pacific time, same time I normally do here, but I'm going to do it over on the Kettlebell Solo channel, and I'll drop the link in here for those of you who want to join me for that live workout. There we go. Ali asked, can I start going to the gym from 28 years old and have biceps like you without test and creatine and protein whey? Probably, but not quite like me because that's me and my genetics. So it depends a little bit on your genetics and what you do for it, but I don't see why not. Anything's possible. You're 28. You can do anything. Elena said, takes a lot of guts to self-reveal. Thanks, Elena. Yeah, it's a little easier saying it online to my phone. I know there's people on the other side watching, and it's definitely a little easier if I was talking to you face to face, or if I was even on a Zoom call and I could see other people's faces and reactions to what I was saying. I think it would be a little more difficult. I'd still be open to doing it, and I'd probably be getting kind of red and a little more sweaty, if I was seeing people's exact reactions. I think that's normal. So it is, it's a good thing about the internet. In some ways, it allows you to be more vulnerable in a bit of a safer way, or at least feel safer, even though you're telling it to more people or you're telling it to people that you don't know. Jedi James said, truth. Mila said, your eyes are so pretty. Thank you. Ali said, is 28 too late to have huge muscles? Mila said it right. Said, no, it's not too late. Absolutely not. Jez said, it's been very thoughtful of you to share your story. You ought to write a memoir and feel like therapy for you. Yeah, that is a good idea, Jez. I mean, I have part of the book already written. I just have to flesh it out a little bit more. So maybe I will. I appreciate you saying that. What you guys can help me think of a title. Mark said, love your honesty. I've been training decades. Looking back, I was only training, but finally got it together. Time and knowing what is best for you takes time. Thank you for your sharing. You're welcome. Thank you for sharing and listening, Mark. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it does take time. It takes time to find the right balance for all of us. And some of us are more drawn to like going wild with it and overdoing it. You know, there's people who may be more drawn to the other side of like, they don't really want to work out, you know, or it's harder for them to get themselves to do it versus those of us who are, you know, have the tendency to overdo. And maybe if you're like a high achiever or perfectionist, you know, you might be more likely to do that with exercise. Elena said, your writing style is smooth. Thank you. I can't take all the credit because my partner Michael helped me with a lot of it, and he helped me like edit it, smooth it out and stuff. So it was a effort between the two of us. A title suggesting the strongest woman. Yeah, it'd be about like true strength, you know, because that's something I learned on this journey that I was on and am still on. But on that journey at the time when I was writing this is just learning about that true strength is really not about how many pounds you can lift. True strength is not about how fit you are. You know, true strength is the ability to face your inner darkness and to come through the other side. True strength is about being able to support the people you love when they're going through a difficult time. True strength is about being able to weather the emotional storms and the struggles that come with life and to keep going and to still find hope and to find a reason to continue and keep, you know, being kind and helping other people. Like true strength, you know, is not about whatever the goals in the gym are. Like those things are great and they can be, you know, training and exercise is important. And I realized that, you know, it was holding an improper place in my life where I was, you know, training was like kind of like my God. Exercise was kind of like, that was like everything was like achieving these skills. And it was, you know, my only real coping mechanism and an avoidance. Really, you know, it's an addiction of sorts. I call it an exercise addiction, although I would say it's, you know, it's different from a drug and alcohol addiction in that it's not necessarily physically addictive. I mean, you get endorphins, so there is some level of it, but it's not that you can't not, like, but there's like a compulsion, and it's kind of similar to a food addiction, I think, although in some ways maybe food addiction is more challenging also to get away from. But both exercise and food are things that you need them to be healthy. You don't need to exercise, okay? You need to eat food to survive. So that's in some ways a more difficult one, but exercise is one where, like, you know, ideally you need to exercise, you need to find a balance. And if you're somebody who's struggled with overtraining, exercise addiction, whatever you want to call it, you have to learn to find a balance and to self-identify when you start to become compulsive about needing to do a certain amount or having to do it anyway, even when your body is sending you all kinds of signals or feeling tired. Mick said, your writing is very good, and good job to Michael as well. Thank you, Mick. Elena said, don't mean to be intrusive. Is Michael the same guy who did 1 hour kettlebell passing with you? No. So Michael started kettlebell partner passing, so he created the 1 hour test, but there's a video of my 1 hour test with a guy named Mike, who is different from Michael. So that's not my partner, no. My partner is the one who started kettlebell partner passing, and so I think he was in the video also, but he was not the one passing with me. And Mick said, and being humble. Thanks, Mick. Jez said, true strength to take the first step you need to take. Absolutely. Jedi James said, very similar to the middle way, a balance. Yes. And Laura said, an obsession, definitely chasing a high. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we can seek that kind of like obsession, addiction, or chasing a high in a lot of different ways, you know, that are normal and acceptable to society. You know, having an exercise addiction, for lack of a clearer word, but having an exercise addiction is generally looked upon as positive by our society. Similar to oftentimes, if you have an eating disorder, sometimes that's also seen as positive. Like if you're thin, even though you're struggling, they may not know you're struggling with an eating disorder, and so that may be seen as a positive thing, as opposed to drugs or alcohol are seen as, very negative. If you're a drug addict or alcoholic, people, that's seen as a very negative thing. But we all seek for that kind of thing in many ways, and I think if we don't find something healthier, we will often use, be it exercise, be it food, be it social media, be it television, be it, sex, relationships, could be a lot of different things. Also substances, of course, as well, caffeine or different things. We can use that stuff to chase a high or to chase, and they're often a avoidance of reality. They're often an avoidance of maybe our day-to-day reality, or their avoidance of our inner reality. So maybe we like our day-to-day life, but maybe we're struggling internally with things that feel too hard to manage without something to cope, and I think that's it was a little both of that for me. I think using exercise, I think there was things I was dissatisfied with in my day-to-day life, and there was a whole bunch of stuff internally that was much easier to avoid with exercise, with using something, right? And for me, that was exercise, to take up my time and to give me a little endorphin boost and give me something to obsess about and think about. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? You're welcome, Elena. Thank you for joining today. I appreciate that. You're welcome, Jedi James. Thanks for being here. If you guys are interested in the rest of my story, there's I think there's quite a bit of it still. We've only covered the first. We've covered the first 5 parts. Sorry, 6 parts. Yeah, we've covered the first 6 parts, but there's as of right now, there's 20 parts to the story. So we got a ways to go. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And next Monday at 1 p.m., I'm going to do the next section. Jez said, was anxiety included in any kind of way? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So much anxiety. that will come up. That will come up. Don't worry. But absolutely. I definitely, was struggling and still struggle with anxiety. A lot of anxiety. I classify it in different ways. Obsessive thinking, anxiety, something that I struggle with to this day. And in many ways, it got worse as I was going through this process of more clearly looking at my reality and taking stock of my inner self. In many ways, it got worse. And that was part of why, I was avoiding it, because in many ways, I didn't really feel anxiety for many years, or I didn't think I did. I think I was just kind of directing it at, sort of obsessing over exercise and doing a lot of exercise, so there was less downtime to focus on that. But that absolutely is part of the story, Jez. Elena said, keep on reading to us, please. Look forward to next Monday. Absolutely will, Elena. Jez says, I can relate too. Yeah, I think that's, it's a big one. We kind of live in a strange time, a strange world. There's a lot of anxiety-inducing things in the way that we live our lives now, and a lot of the things that we value in our world, I think, create feelings of anxiety versus maybe what life was like. I think there was anxiety before, our phones and this excessive, technological world, but I think it definitely contributes to it. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and log off. I really, really appreciate you all being here and listening and your comments, and I look forward to sharing more with you next Monday. Hope to see you on the Kettlebell Solo channel live on Wednesday. Have a wonderful week.